Imagine having all the money in the world. You are the heir to the biggest fortune in America. Your father is the governor of New York. Your future is entirely laid out for you. But instead of living in a mansion, you end up freezing, starving, and clinging to a flipped boat in the middle of a crocodile-infested ocean. You look at your friend. You say, "I think I can make it." You swim toward the dark jungle shoreline, and you were never seen. For decades, the world believed you drowned, but then a piece of hidden footage surfaced. A video showing a remote cannibal tribe, and rowing right in the middle of them was a white man, a man who looked exactly like you. This is the chilling true story of Michael Rockefeller. The year was 1960. Michael Rockefeller was 23 years. He was not your average billionaire's son. He didn't care about Wall Street. He didn't want to wear a suit. He wanted adventure. He was fascinated by the unknown, and there was no place more unknown than Netherlands, New Guinea. Today, it is part of Indonesia, but back then, it was one of the most isolated places on Earth. It was a world of thick, endless jungles, muddy rivers, and hidden tribes that had never seen the outside world. Michael was obsessed with the Asmat. The Asmat were a remote tribe living deep in the swampy forests. They were famous for their incredible wood carvings, but they were also famous for something else. They were active headhunters, and they practiced cannibalism. To the Asmat, death was never natural. If someone in their village died, they believed it was caused by dark magic from an enemy tribe, and that death had to be avenged. They would hunt their enemies, would take their heads, and they would consume their bodies to absorb their power. This was not a place for a wealthy kid from New York, but Michael didn't care. But what he didn't know was that his obsession would soon lead him into a nightmare. It was November 17, 1961. Michael was traveling with a Dutch anthropologist named René Wassing. They also had two local guides with. They were trying to reach a remote Asmat village to trade for artifacts. To get there, they had to cross a massive, dangerous body of water, the Arafura Sea. They bought a custom-made boat from a local trader. It was essentially two heavy wooden canoes tied together. They strapped a small motor to the back. It was heavy, it was slow, and it was completely overloaded with trade goods, axes, knives, tobacco, and camping gear. The locals warned Michael. They told him the ocean currents here were violent. They told him the tides could drag a boat miles out to sea in minutes. But Michael was in a hurry. He ignored the warnings. They pushed the heavy pontoon boat into the water. For the first few hours, everything was fine. The sun was shining, the water was calm. But the ocean in New Guinea can change in a heartbeat. The wind began to howl. Dark clouds rolled in. The waves started getting bigger. At first, they were just rocking the boat. Then water started splashing over the sides. Michael and René grabbed buckets. They started bailing out water as fast as they could. But it wasn't enough. The waves were getting violent. Suddenly, a massive wave crashed directly into the motor. The engine sputtered, it coughed, and then it died completely. They were miles from the shore, and they had no power. They had no idea that the real horror was just beginning. The boat was now completely at the mercy of the ocean. The massive current was pulling them further out to sea. Panic set in. The two local guides knew exactly how dangerous this water was. They knew if they stayed on the heavy boat, they would die. They told Michael and René they were going to swim for help. They jumped into the churning water and disappeared into the waves. Now Michael and René were completely alone. The boat was taking on more water by the second. Then the worst thing possible happened. A rogue wave hit the side of the boat. The heavy canoes flipped completely upside down. Michael and René were thrown into the violent ocean. They gasped for air. They swam frantically back to the overturned hull. They pulled themselves up, clinging to the slippery wood. Everything they had was gone. No food, no water, no radio, no flares. Just two men holding on to a piece of wood in the middle of nowhere. And then the sun went down. Nighttime on the Arafura Sea is terrifying. It is pitch black. You cannot see your own hands in front of your face, but you can hear things. You can hear the water splashing around you. You can feel things brushing against your legs in the dark. This water was heavily populated with saltwater crocodiles, some of the biggest and most aggressive predators on the planet. And if the crocodiles didn't get you, the tiger sharks would. Michael and Renee held on for dear life. They didn't sleep a single wink. They shivered in the freezing wind. Every hour felt like a lifetime. But when the sun finally came up, their nightmare got even worse. It was the morning of November 19. They had been clinging to the overturned boat for nearly 24 hours. They were deeply dehydrated. Their skin was burning under the harsh tropical sun. They strained their eyes looking at the horizon. They hoped to see a rescue boat. They hoped their guides had made it to a village. But the ocean was completely empty. No boats, no planes in the sky, nothing. Far in the distance, they could just barely see the dark green line of the jungle coast. It was at least 10 miles away, maybe more. The current was still pushing them further out to sea. Michael realized no one was coming. He looked at the distant shoreline. He was young. He was a very strong swimmer. He believed he could make it. Renee begged him not to go. Renee knew the human body could not survive a 10-mile swim in these currents, not to mention the sharks, not to mention the crocodiles. But Michael had made up his mind. He stripped down to his underwear. He grabbed 2 empty red jerry cans that were floating near the boat. He tied them together with his belt to use as a makeshift flotation device. He looked at Renee one last time. He said 5 words that would go down in history. "I think I can make it." Then Michael slipped into the water. He began to paddle toward the dark green shoreline. Renee watched him go. He watched the red jerry cans bob up and down in the waves. He watched Michael get smaller and smaller until he was just a tiny speck on the horizon. And then he was gone. What happened to Michael next is one of the darkest mysteries of the 20th century. The next day, a Dutch search plane flew over the area. They spotted the overturned boat. They saw Renee waving frantically. A ship was sent, and Renee was pulled from the water. He was sunburned, starved, and traumatized, but he was alive. The first thing the rescuers asked was, "Where is Michael?" Renee pointed toward the distant shore. He told them Michael swam for it. When the news reached New York, absolute chaos broke out. The son of Nelson Rockefeller was missing. Money was no object. The greatest search and rescue mission in the history of the South Pacific began. Nelson Rockefeller immediately flew to New Guinea in a private jet. He brought an army of reporters with him. The Dutch government sent fleets of ships. They sent airplanes to scan the water. Helicopters flew low over the jungle canopy. Thousands of locals were paid to search the swamps. They searched the beaches. They searched the mangrove forests. They scanned every single inch of the ocean. They even found the 2 local guides who had swam for help. They had made it to shore safely. But of Michael, there was absolutely no trace. No body washed up on the beach, no torn clothing. Even the 2 bright red jerry cans were never found. It was as if the ocean had simply swallowed him whole. After 10 days of intense searching, Nelson Rockefeller gave up. He flew back to New York empty-handed. In 1964, Michael Rockefeller was officially declared legally dead. The official ruling was drowning. The authorities said he either drowned from exhaustion or was eaten by a crocodile. Case closed. But the case was far from closed because the locals knew a very different story. Years passed, but rumors began to leak out of the deep jungle. Missionaries living near the Asmat tribe started hearing whispers. The locals were talking about a white man. They said he didn't drown. They said he made it to the shore. The village of Otsjanep was one of the most feared Asmat settlements. And according to the whispers, Michael washed up on their exact beach. He was exhausted. He was completely drained, but he was live. He crawled out of the mud, expecting help, but he had terrible timing. Just 3 years earlier, a Dutch patrol had come through that exact area. There was a misunderstanding. Guns were fired, and 5 of the top leaders of the Otsjanep village were killed by the white men. In the Asmat culture, a death must be balanced. A death must be avenged. The spirits of the dead leaders were angry. The tribe was waiting for their chance to balance the universe. And suddenly, a wealthy, vulnerable white man washes up right on their doorstep. He was completely unarmed. He was barely able to stand. According to the tribal rumors, the warriors found him on the muddy bank. They recognized him as a white man, the same kind of man who killed their leaders. They didn't see a billionaire. They didn't see a governor's son. They saw an opportunity for revenge. The rumors said they drove a spear right through him. They dragged him into the jungle. They cut off his head. They roasted his body on a fire, and they ate him. They used his bones to make daggers and fishing spears. They kept his skull as a sacred trophy. The rumors were so strong that a private investigator, Carl Hoffman, went to New Guinea decades later. He learned the language. He lived with the tribe. He heard the stories firsthand. The older men in the village admitted to killing a white man on the beach. They even named the warriors who did it. They said the white man was wearing metal rings on his face. Michael wore thick, wire-rimmed glasses. They said he was wearing a strange white loincloth. Michael swam in his white underwear. The evidence was overwhelming. It seemed the mystery was finally solved. Michael didn't drown. He survived the impossible swim, only to be murdered and eaten ashore. But then, a piece of footage was discovered that changed everything. In 2015, a documentary film crew was reviewing old footage of New Guinea. The footage was shot in 1969, 8 years after Michael disappeared. The video showed a group of Asmat warriors rowing massive wooden canoes down a river. They were covered in war paint. They were holding spears. It was a powerful, intimidating sight. But as the camera panned across the canoes, something caught the eye of the researcher, something impossible. Right in the middle of the warriors, rowing right alongside them, was a white man. He was naked. His skin was painted. He had a thick beard, but his facial structure was undeniable. He looked exactly like Michael Rockefeller. He wasn't a prisoner. He wasn't tied up. He was rowing with them. He was participating in their rituals. He looked like he belonged there. When this footage hit the internet, it exploded. People analyzed the man's jawline. They analyzed his hairline. They compared it to photos of Michael. The resemblance is absolutely terrifying. Could it be? Could the story of him being eaten just be a cover-up? Did the tribe lie to protect him from the outside world? Did Michael, the billionaire heir who hated modern society, decide to leave his old life behind forever? Did he choose to become one of the very people he was so obsessed with? To this day, no one knows the truth. The Rockefeller family has never confirmed the footage. The skull was never recovered. The swamp keeps its secrets. When he swam into that dark water, Michael Rockefeller left the modern world forever. Whether he was swallowed by the ocean, consumed by the tribe, or chose to become one of them, he finally found the escape he was looking for.